Welcome to Still City News. For the past 25 years, Dr. Jim Withers has been out on the streets of Pittsburgh and surrounding communities, providing medical treatment to the homeless. Dr. Withers is the founder and medical director of Operation Safety Net. Operation Safety Net is Pittsburgh Mercy's innovative, award-winning medical and social service outreach program for persons who are experiencing homelessness in Allegheny County. A while back, I had the opportunity to speak with Dr. Withers about his journey.
Well, I'm Dr. Jim Withers, and I'm the medical director and founder of Operation Safety Net, which is part of the Pittsburgh Mercy system. And I also teach medicine to a number of health science students, and I'm affiliated with the Mercy Hospital of Pittsburgh. My interest in people that live on the street really started as a medical educator. I worked with the issues of domestic violence and some other issues that made me aware that we really don't always connect with people in their actual lives and their reality. We don't put ourselves in their shoes very easily. And so I felt we needed a classroom that was in their turf, that was very different than maybe the hospital or the clinic system. And when I thought about it, I said, what better teachers of exclusion than the people maybe who were living under the bridges here in Pittsburgh? So in 1992, I didn't know how to connect with folks on the street, and I found a gentleman who was formerly homeless, who had been going out on the streets, and talked him into taking me. He said, as long as you don't dress like a doctor and don't act like a jerk, I'll take you along. And so I actually went to my church library and found a book, 52 Ways to Help the Homeless, in which it described how to dress like a homeless person. So I put dirt in my hair, and I was doing the whole 9 yards. And when I showed up, Mike said, well, you've got the look at least. And so he began taking me out at night into the homeless camps and abandoned buildings here of Pittsburgh, and that's how I got started. From the start, I saw people with blood pressures that were off the scale, people with mental illness, pregnant women, elderly individuals with large leg wounds, some really, really sad things. And so morally, I just really had to start treating them. And I think that's where I really got started as a home care service for the streets. That was back in '92. Street medicine is as I call it now, was something that I'd never heard of, and there was no rules for it. So we just kind of made it up as we were going along. There were certain areas that Mike knew people would always be or likely to be, and he was my outreach guide. And so I got to know those campsites and the key people that were there. There were individuals that lived alone, curled up next to a dumpster, and he knew where those people were. So really his guidance and his relationship was a key for me in getting started. But over time, we got to know the camps and the areas, and we actually divided different volunteer nurses and doctors with their formerly homeless partners in different sections of the city. And you know, the main ones over time have been the North Side, South Side, Downtown, Oakland, the Hill, and the Strip District. We later expanded to McKeesport and McKees Rocks, and now we actually cover virtually the whole county, especially if we hear about someone who's sleeping in a car or doing something like that. In the beginning, we worked strictly after work when people were off because it was all volunteer. So it was nighttime rounds. And I would go out those days maybe 3 nights a week. I cut back to just Monday nights for myself. Later, when we were able to get some grants and some funding and actually had a staff, then we began doing a lot of daytime work. And right now, you know, we work Monday through Friday, and we visit all over the area. We visit people in the hospitals. Street medicine consults are available. We navigate people through the health system. And in the early 2000s, we began to access funds that allowed us to put people into apartments. We've housed over 1,400 people, chronically homeless people, in their own apartments. About 80% of those remain housed over time. And I make a lot of house calls now to people that are actually housed that I used to know under bridges. And I find that very satisfying. If I can say, I think we're kind of rediscovering or maybe reinventing the principles of healthcare. And what I mean by that is it's the house call. We've really become part of the fabric of the street community. That's not the way healthcare is practiced. We don't have the opportunity to get into people's homes as much, to be with them, to become human to them. And that's one of the advantages of street medicine, is that we become very trusted and loved by the people on the streets. So they reveal their camps and they share things with us that they know are private. And it's a radically different relationship. And I think that leads to much better potential for healing. The first thing that I realized was there are a lot of people that I didn't know about in the nooks and crannies of our city. Now they do get chased by, community groups and the police and the businesses. So it's kind of a migratory, we follow the herd, if you will, which is a little inconvenient, but, we're committed to them wherever they end up being. They range from youngsters to oldsters, people in their 90s, actually. And the range of medical problems that they have are the ones that you'd expect, for the most part, but they're untreated. So you have high blood pressure that's out of this world. You have cancers, you have diabetes, you have other illnesses that have not gone treated. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people don't think about. But you have things that are unique to the street. You have frostbite, you have violence inflicted on homeless people. You have wounds that are festering. It's not unusual to see maggots crawling in someone's wounds. Things that could have been prevented but get worse because of the disconnect between the street and the actual health system. There's a lot of mental illness. I think of the streets as the largest waiting room for mental health services in this country, maybe the prisons, but it's close. And I'd say 30 to 50% of the people have mental health problems. And if you're on the street long enough, you develop a form of thinking that's a survival strategy. And that's its own issue as well. We specialize in the people that live outside. That's why I had to create a new name for it, street medicine. In the general homeless population, probably 80% are only homeless for less than a year. If you're in the population that's actually living under a bridge, though, you tend to be in the chronically homeless population, which means that you've been homeless 4 times in the last 3 years, or homeless a whole year. And those folks have a lot more challenges just because of who they are. So I'd say the length of stay on the street for our population is probably around 4 or 5 years. But we've had people who've been out on the street for 20 years. And with those folks, it's just hang in there. And yet, sometimes they as well get off the street as well. One was a fellow named George, and he actually lived under a bridge not far from the Strip District. And he was a tough guy, a Vietnam vet. He had depression. He drank a bit, but he was a survivor. And I was just trying to work with him and understand him, and we were getting closer. And one night he came out from under the bridge, and his arm was broken. It was actually hanging down. And he looked at me and he said, "Do you have anything for a cold?" I thought, okay, but what about that arm? And he said, "I'm not going to any hospital. They don't treat you very well." And he used more colorful language. So the best I could do was to splint his arm with a SAM splint, which is, I'm sure you guys know what that is, but it's a malleable splint that you can use in a wilderness situation. And I said, "Well, I'm going to come back tomorrow and we'll see how you're doing," because he refused to go to the hospital. So in those days I had a little Geo Metro, my Mother Teresa car, and then I had a used but cute red Alfa Romeo convertible. So I showed up in the Alfa in the morning with the top down, and I said, "Hop in, George." So the two of us drove around in the convertible enjoying the weather, and after a while he said, "All right, I'll go to the hospital." So we went to the ER, and it was tough to walk him through it, but he got his arm treated, and I think it really helped the medical staff to see, to understand where he had come from, and see that there was a plan here, because I think they feel so many times that they don't know where these people go or things like that. So that helped. Sort of to borrow from Mr. Rogers, if you show someone that we love you just the way you are, it's kind of a grace concept. That really impresses people. And then they'll listen, and things can happen. But any amount of force or intimidation or anything like that really backfires. So it's the message of love, the message of commitment that people buy into, that then positions them to move forward. So the goal for us is to get people into primary care, to get them into housing, employment if possible. But you can usually only get to those things by really being with the person for a while. And they check out whether they can trust you or themselves before they make that journey. It's fascinating, actually.